Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 became the Eternal Dragon W.I.T.H. the final Omnitrix evolution and got Harem of Gwen, Charmcaster and Julie. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Final Countdown. The familiar weight of the Omnitrix felt heavier today. Ben Tennyson stood atop the abandoned observatory, watching Bellwood's skyline shimmer in the summer heat. At 23, he'd worn the alien device for over a decade now. Through battles that had saved not just Earth but the entire universe multiple times. Yet something felt different tonight. The device that had become as much a part of him as his own age. Earbeat pulsed with an unfamiliar rhythm against his skin. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, running his thumb over the sleek surface. The Omnitrix's dial flickered. Green, then blue, then a strange violet hue he'd never seen before. Not an alarm, not a malfunction, but something else entirely. Something evolutionary. His communicator buzzed. Grandpa Max's voice came through, tinged with the gruffness that had only deepened with age. "Ben, we've got anomalous energy readings downtown. Similar to the ones from yesterday, but stronger. On my way." Ben stepped to the edge of the roof. The night air rushing through his brown hair. Any word from Azimuth? Still nothing. Whatever's happening with the Omnitrix, he's being unusually quiet about it. That was concerning. Azimuth, the brilliant Galvan creator of the Omnitrix, rarely missed an opportunity to lecture Ben about his creation. His silence spoke volumes. "I'll check it out and report back." Ben twisted the dial, cycling through his transformations before settling on one of his favorites. "XLR8 should get me there fast." He slammed his palm down on the watch face. The familiar green flash enveloped him, but instead of the expected transformation. Pain shot through his arm like liquid fire. The energy that normally reconstructed his DNA into alien form surged through his veins with uncontrolled ferocity. When the light faded, he wasn't XLR8 at all. He was something new. Scales of midnight blue covered his humanoid form, iridescent in the moonlight. Curved talons extended from his fingertips, and when he exhaled in surprise, a wisp of blue-green flame escaped his lips. "What the?" His voice resonated with a harmonic undertone, like two voices speaking in perfect unison. "This isn't in my playlist." The communicator crackled. "Ben, your signal just spiked off the charts. What happened?" Ben examined his transformed state, flexing unfamiliar muscles that rippled beneath the scales. "I'm not sure. The Omnitrix gave me something new. Some kind of dragon form, I think." "Dragon? That's not in any catalog of alien species we know about. Tell me about it." Ben spread what he now realized were wings, massive, leathery appendages that spanned twice his height. "But I'm going to make the most of it." With an experimental flap, he launched himself from the rooftop, instinct guiding movements he'd never made before. The city spread beneath him, a constellation of lights against the darkness. Flight had always been exhilarating, whether as Big Chill or Jetray, but this was different, primal, powerful. As though he were tapping into something ancient and vast. The anomalous energy readings led him toward Bellwood University's physics department, where a crowd had gathered outside the research building. Campus security attempted to maintain a perimeter around a phenomenon that defied explanation, a fracture in the air itself, a vertical line of pulsing blue energy that distorted everything around it. Ben landed before the crowd, eliciting gasps and raised phones. After years as a public figure, he'd grown accustomed to the attention, but the reactions tonight held more fear than usual. He caught his reflection in a nearby window and understood why. This form didn't look like his usual aliens. It looked almost mythological, the stuff of human nightmares and legends. "Everyone needs to step back," he called out. The dual-toned voice carrying effortless authority. "Plumber business." The mention of the intergalactic peacekeeping force cleared some space, though many continued recording. Ben approached the rift cautiously, feeling the Omnitrix respond to its proximity. The device pulsed against his scaled wrist, synchronizing with the rift's own rhythm. "Max, are you seeing this?" He activated the visual feed on his communicator. "Getting it now. That's no ordinary dimensional breach. The energy signature is familiar somehow." As Ben reached toward the rift, the scales on his arm began to glow with the same blue-violet light. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flared brilliantly. Ben, don't. Too late. His clawed fingertips brushed the edge of the rift, and knowledge flooded his mind. Equations, cosmic coordinates, the taste of other dimensions. The rift widened, responding to his touch like an instrument to a musician. Within the luminous tear, a silhouette appeared, humanoid and falling forward. Acting on instinct, Ben lunged, catching the figure as it tumbled through. The rift snapped closed behind them with a thunderclap of displaced air. Had shattered windows for 100 yards in every direction. In his arms lay an unconscious woman in her early 20s, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her clothing a mixture of technological components and mystical sigils. A face he knew better than almost any other, yet not quite the same. Gwen, he whispered, but even as he said it, he knew this wasn't his cousin. The facial structure was similar, but subtle differences told him this was someone else. Someone from elsewhere. The woman's eyes snapped open, bright violet rather than Gwen's green, and immediately filled with panic. Her hands glowed with mana energy, different in color and texture from his cousin's familiar pink aura. "Release me, creature," she demanded, her accent strange, English but with unfamiliar inflections. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ben said, setting her down carefully. "My name is Ben Tennyson. You came through a dimensional rift." Recognition flickered across her face, followed by confusion, then guarded calculation. Ben Tennyson. Impossible. Ben Tennyson died defending the forge of creation in my world. The transformation chose that moment to time out, the scales and wings dissolving in a flash of green light. Leaving Ben in his human form, jeans, white shirt with black stripe, and the Omnitrix on his wrist. The crowd murmured in renewed interest. The woman staggered back. "It is you, but not you." Her gaze hardened. "Which timeline is this? What year?" "Earth. Primary timeline according to Professor Paradox. 2025. She processed this information, eyes darting around as she took in the surroundings. "The architecture is all wrong. The sky." She looked up at the night stars. "The constellations are different." "Who are you?" Ben asked, though he already suspected. She straightened, composing herself with visible effort. "My name is Gwendolyn Horizon, Archmage of the Eastern Hemisphere and Temporal Engineer for the Interdimensional Defense Force. And if I'm here, it means the walls between realities are failing." Her eyes fixed on the Omnitrix. "It's begun in this timeline too, hasn't it?" Before Ben could answer, the ground trembled. Across the campus quad, another rift began to form, larger, more unstable, crackling with crimson lightning rather than blue energy. "That's not good," Ben said, already reaching for the Omnitrix. "What's coming through that one?" Gwendolyn, this alternate version of Gwen, raised her hands, complex sigils forming around her fingers. "Nothing beneficial. In my world, the red rifts brought the chronivores. The what now? Entities that consume time itself. They stripped the years from living beings, leaving husks of dust." The rift tore wider, and something began to emerge, a shadowy mass with too many limbs, moving with unnatural fluidity. Campus security officers who had approached too closely aged before Ben's eyes, their bodies withering and collapsing as the creature pulled temporal energy from them. Ben slammed down on the Omnitrix without selecting a form, trusting it to give him what he needed. The green flash enveloped him, but again, the transformation felt different, more invasive, rewiring something fundamental in his being. When the light faded, he was the dragon form again, but evolved further, now with a crystalline breastplate and a crown of horns that channeled energy visibly between their tips. "This is getting weird," he muttered, before launching himself toward the chronivore. The creature sensed his approach and whipped around with frightening speed. Up close, it resembled a living shadow with a core of swirling red temporal energy, its form constantly shifting between different possible configurations as though it couldn't decide on a single shape. Ben inhaled deeply, drawing on instinct, and exhaled a stream of emerald fire that bent and twisted in impossible ways, burning through time rather than matter. The chronivore shrieked, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, and recoiled. Gwendolyn appeared beside him, levitating on a platform of arcane energy. "The Omnitrix," she said, eyes wide. "It's already evolving to the penultimate state." "The what?" Ben dodged a tendril of temporal energy that would have aged him to dust. "Little busy here." The Eternal Dragon configuration. It shouldn't be possible in this timeline for at least another decade. She wove complex patterns in the air, creating a containment field around the rift. In my world, it took Ben years to master it, and even then. The chronivore lashed out, shattering her containment field. Ben caught her as she fell, the dragon wings spreading wide to stabilize their flight. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, setting her down behind the dubious safety of a stone monument. "But I'm open to suggestions on how to stop that thing." Gwendolyn's expression turned grim. "The dragon knows. Ask it." "Ask what?" "The form you're wearing. It's not just an alien transformation. It's a cosmic entity merging with your consciousness." She gripped his scaled arm. "Close your eyes. Look inward. The knowledge is already there." Skeptical but desperate, Ben closed his eyes. The sounds of chaos, screams, the chronovore's unearthly wailing, the campus alarm systems, faded away. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw it, a vast, serpentine form composed of stars and void. Coiled around the very fabric of reality. The Eternal Dragon, ancient beyond comprehension, guardian of the cosmic balance. And it was looking back at him. "You are not ready, Asteriska." Voice like the death of stars whispered in his mind. "But necessity overrides readiness. We will do what must be done." Asterisk. Ben's eyes snapped open, now glowing with internal light. His voice, when he spoke, carried that same harmonic resonance but amplified 100-fold. "The chronivore is a symptom, not the disease. The rifts must be sealed at their source." He raised his hands, and the Omnitrix symbol on his chest expanded, projecting a holographic map of ley lines beneath the city, energy pathways that had been disrupted by something at their nexus. "There," Ben said, pointing to a location across town. "The Temple of Tempus. Something's been activated." Gwendolyn paled. "The Tempus Occultatum exists in this timeline. We destroyed ours centuries ago." "Well, apparently we missed the memo." Ben turned toward the chronivore, which was steadily consuming more temporal energy from its surroundings. First things first. Drawing on knowledge that wasn't his but now flowed through him, Ben traced a complex sigil in the air. The chronivore froze, caught in a moment of suspended animation. "That won't hold it for long," he said. "We need to get to the temple." Gwendolyn nodded, already creating a teleportation circle. "I can get us there, but my power is limited in this dimension. The magical constants are different. Then we'll need help." Ben tapped his communicator. "Max, we've got a situation. I need you to contact Charmcaster." A long pause. "Ben, Charmcaster hasn't been seen since the Legerdemain incident 2 years ago." "We've tried." "Try harder. Tell her." He hesitated, the dragon's knowledge flowing through him. "Tell her the scales of Nemina are tipping. She'll understand." He ended the transmission before Max could question him further. Ben himself didn't fully understand what he'd just said. The words had come from somewhere else, knowledge imprinted on his consciousness by this new form. "Ready?" Gwendolyn asked, the teleportation circle pulsing with energy. Ben nodded, stepping into the circle with her. As the university campus dissolved around them, his enhanced senses detected another presence watching from the shadows, a familiar figure. Observing with calculating eyes before turning away. Julie Yamamoto hadn't meant to stumble into an interdimensional crisis. All she'd wanted was to finish her doctoral research on xenotechnology integration. Using components salvaged from SHIP, the galvanic mechamorph symbiote that had once been her pet and partner. After their amicable breakup years ago, Ben had helped her secure a position at B. Elwood University's xenobiology department, where she'd excelled. Tonight was supposed to be a routine test of a new communication array that might, theoretically, reach SHIP wherever he was in the universe. Instead, her lab had detected the dimensional anomaly minutes before it manifested, and her equipment had gone haywire. Now, hidden behind a maintenance shed, she examined the small device. In her palm, a fragment of SHIP's technology that had responded to the rift's energy by partially activating, forming a symbiotic bond with her hand. Black and green nanites crawled beneath her skin in circuit-like patterns, processing information at speeds her human brain could barely comprehend. "What are you showing me?" she whispered as data flowed directly into her consciousness. Coordinates, specifications, warnings in a language that translated itself as she processed it, all pointing to the same conclusion. whatever was happening tonight was just the beginning. Julie slipped away from the campus, the partial symbiote guiding her movements. Ben hadn't seen her, and that was probably for the best. Their relationship had evolved into a comfortable friendship over the years, the awkwardness of their breakup long faded. But what she'd just witnessed, Ben transforming into something that wasn't any alien she recognized, communing with an alternate version of his cousin, suggested complications beyond anything they'd prepared for. The symbiote urged her west, toward an industrial district that had been abandoned after the Incarcine invasion years prior. There, according to the data flooding her mind, she would find what she needed to understand the coming crisis. What she found instead was Charmcaster. The silver-haired sorceress hadn't aged a day since their last encounter. Her youthful appearance preserved by magic that Julie couldn't begin to comprehend. She stood atop a crumbling factory roof, her signature purple magic swirling around her as she manipulated a complex array of runic stones. "I was wondering when one of you would show up," Charmcaster said without turning. "Though I expected Tennyson, not his ex." Julie approached cautiously, despite Ben's insistence that Charmcaster had shown signs of reform before her disappearance. The woman's reputation for volatility remained intact. "I'm not here because of Ben. I'm here because of this." She held up her hand, displaying the symbiotic technology. Charmcaster finally turned, her eyes widening marginally, the only indication of surprise she allowed herself. "Interesting," she said, descending from her perch in a swirl of magic. "The galvanic mechamorph fragment is responding to the dimensional fluctuations. Just as my runic array predicted. You know what's happening." Charmcaster's lips curved in a mirthless smile. "I've spent 2 years in the spaces between dimensions, searching for answers. Tonight, those answers started materializing." She gestured to the horizon, where a faint violet glow emanated from downtown Bellwood. "The Tempus Occultatum has awakened. And with it, the final evolution begins." "Final evolution? Of what?" "Of the Omnitrix. Of Ben Tennyson." Charmcaster turned back to her runic array. "Of everything." The teleportation circle deposited Ben and Gwendolyn in the heart of downtown Bellwood, directly before an unremarkable office building that most citizens passed without a second glance. To magical senses, however, the structure thrummed with ancient power disguised by powerful perception filters. "The Temple of Tempus," Gwendolyn whispered. Hiding in plain sight, Ben's draconic form towered over pedestrians, who gave them a wide berth. Some took photos, others ran, but most simply detoured around them as if subconsciously avoiding the area. "The perception filter is affecting them," Ben noted. "They see us, but they don't register us as important. Standard temporal defense mechanism. The temple doesn't want to be disturbed." Gwendolyn approached the building's entrance, her hands weaving detection spells. "But something's already broken through its defenses. Something powerful." Ben placed a scaled hand on the glass doors, which rippled like water at his touch. "Not broken through. Invited in." He pushed, and the doors dissolved, revealing not a corporate lobby but an immense stone chamber that couldn't possibly fit within the building's actual dimensions. Ancient columns reached toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The air smelled of dust and ozone. At the chamber's center stood a circular dais inscribed with astronomical symbols. Surrounding a pedestal where a familiar hourglass shape was etched, the same symbol as the Omnitrix. "It recognizes you," Gwendolyn said softly. "In my world, the temple was keyed to respond only to the eternal dragon." Ben stepped onto the dais, and the etchings illuminated beneath his feet, responding to his presence. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest pulsed in synchronized rhythm. "Something's wrong," he said, sensing disturbances in the temple's energy. "This place has been tampered with. Recently." A slow clapping echoed through the chamber. From behind a massive column stepped a tall, elegant figure in ornate armor that seemed to shift between different historical periods with each movement. "Perceptive, young Tennyson. Or should I say, young dragon." The figure bowed with theatrical flourish. "Maltruant, at your service." Ben tensed. "The rogue Chronosapian. Paradox told me you were imprisoned outside of time. A temporary inconvenience, I assure you." Maltruant gestured around the temple. "Time is my domain, after all. And this sacred space has been most accommodating in facilitating my return." Gwendolyn stepped forward, magic crackling around her clenched fists. "In my world, you led the temporal genocide that collapsed the 7th dimension. Ah, a traveler from another timeline. How fascinating. Maltruant's clockwork face couldn't smile, but his voice carried smug satisfaction. In this world, my ambitions are more evolutionary. Why destroy time when one can master it? He raised his hand, revealing a device embedded in his palm, a dark mirror of the Omnitrix. Pulsing with crimson energy, the Chronotrix, he announced. My greatest creation, reverse-engineered from fragments of your device collected across thousands of timelines. It all OWS me to manipulate the temporal state of any being or object I touch. That's what's causing the rifts, Ben realized. You're punching holes in the dimensional walls. A side effect, nothing more. The rifts will seal themselves once the process is complete. Maltruant approached the central pedestal. The universe operates in cycles, Tennyson. The age of heroes is ending. The age of ascension begins tonight. When the Omnitrix reaches its final evolutionary state. The eternal dragon configuration, Gwendolyn said. You're trying to accelerate Ben's transformation. Precisely. The bow, why is merely the vessel for something far greater? Maltruant's voice dropped to a reverent tone. The eternal dragon, cosmic regulator, keeper of dimensional balance, enforcer of the prime timeline. Its power harnessed through the Chronotrix, I can rewrite reality itself. Ben felt the dragon form responding to Maltruant's words, ancient knowledge surfacing in his consciousness. The transformation isn't meant to happen this way. Forcing it could destabilize the entire multiverse. A necessary risk. Eons of planning have led to this moment. Maltruant placed his hand on the pedestal, and the temple trembled. The alignment approaches. The Chronotrix calls to its counterpart. Feel it, Tennyson, the pull of destiny. The Omnitrix burned against Ben's scaled wrist, its green glow shifting toward violet. Pain lanced through his body as the transformation began to evolve further, scales hardening into armor, wings expanding, consciousness expanding to encompass knowledge beyond human comprehension. Ben, Gwendolyn shouted, throwing up a magical barrier around him. You have to resist. If the transformation completes under Maltruant's influence, you'll lose your humanity entirely. Through the haze of pain and cosmic awareness flooding his mind, Ben struggled to maintain control. The eternal dragon entity whispered temptations, power beyond imagining, knowledge of all things. Freedom from the limitations of mortal form. We are meant to be, it whispered. You have always been my vessel, from the moment the Omnitrix found you. Not like this, Ben growled, fighting to maintain his sense of self. Not as a weapon for Maltruant. The temple's structure began to warp, reality bending around the conflicting energies of the Omnitrix and Chronotrix. Outside, the dimensional rifts across Bellwood widened. More chronivores slipping through to feed on the temporal disturbances. Maltruant raised his arms triumphantly. Yes, the merging begins. Soon the dragon will be mine to command. A blast of fuchsia energy struck him from behind, sending him staggering. I think not, Clockwork King. Charmcaster strode into the temple, her magic swirling around her like a living thing. The dragon chooses its own path. Behind her came Julie, her arm now fully integrated with the galvanic mechamorph technology, forming an armored carapace that extended to her shoulder. Ben, whatever's happening, you need to fight it. Maltruant recovered quickly, temporal energy crackling around him. More witnesses to my ascension. How fitting. He raised the Chronotrix. Perhaps a demonstration of my power is in order. Quote, he fired a beam of crimson energy at Charmcaster, who deflected it with a hasty shield spell. The redirected energy struck one of the temple's columns, aging it to dust in seconds. Julie's symbiotic arm transformed into a cannon that fired pulses of disruptive energy, temporarily jamming the Chronotrix's functions. I can't block him for long. The temporal frequencies keep adapting. In the center of the chaos, Ben fought his internal battle. The dragon entity pulled him toward transcendence, while his human consciousness desperately clung to identity and memory. Faces flashed before him, Max, his parents, Gwen, Kevin, and now these three women fighting to save him. Gwendolyn from another dimension, Charmcaster seeking redemption, and Julie, his first love. Returned to the battlefield with new powers of her own. They need you, a voice whispered, not the dragon's, but his own inner strength. Not as a cosmic entity, but as Ben Tennyson. With tremendous effort, Ben slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. Instead of reverting to human form, the transformation stabilized. The draconic aspects remained, but now balanced with his human consciousness. The violet glow receded, returning to the familiar green. Enough, he roared, his voice shaking the temple foundations. The combatants froze, even Maltruant hesitating at the sheer authority in that voice. Ben rose into the air, wings spread wide, the Omnitrix symbol blazing on his chest. The eternal dragon will not be commanded, Maltruant. Not by you, not by anyone. Impossible. The Chronosapian sputtered. The transformation should have overwhelmed your consciousness completely. You calculated wrong. Ben gestured, and the temple's energy realigned. E-dimensional distortions beginning to stabilize. The Omnitrix doesn't just transform my body, it preserves my identity through every change. That's what Azimuth designed it to do. Maltruant backed away. This changes nothing. The process has begun. The rifts will continue to spread. The chronivores will consume this timeline, and I will simply try again in another. I don't think so. Ben extended his hand, and a sphere of emerald energy encapsulated Maltruant. The Chronotrix responds to the Omnitrix. And right now, I'm telling it to shut down. The crimson device on Maltruant's palm flickered and went dark. The Chronosapian struggled against his containment, but the sphere held firm. This is temporary. You cannot hold me forever. The eternal dragon transformation will complete eventually. With or without my intervention. You're right about one thing, Ben said, his dual-toned voice resonating with newfound wisdom. The transformation has begun, but it will happen on my terms, not yours. He turned to the three women who had come to his aid. The rifts are still expanding. Maltruant's meddling has destabilized the dimensional boundaries beyond what the temple can repair on its own. Gwendolyn stepped forward. In my world, we developed a dimensional anchoring ritual for such emergencies. With enough power, we could adapt it here. You'd need at least 4 magical practitioners of master rank. Charmcaster pointed out. We have 2 at best. Julie raised her symbiotic arm. The mechamorph technology can interface with magical energy. I might be able to serve as a conduit, amplifying what power you have. And the 4th? Charmcaster asked. Ben's eyes glowed. The dragon itself, not fully awakened, but aware enough to participate. A plan formed quickly. While Gwendolyn and Charmcaster prepared the ritual circle, Julie interfaced with the temple's ancient technology, creating a feedback loop that would channel their combined energies. Ben maintained his hold on Maltruant while consulting the dragon entity's knowledge, modifying the ritual to work in this dimension. Outside the temple, across Bellwood, the rifts began to pulse in synchronized rhythm, the dimensional walls growing thinner by the minute. Through their mystical awareness, they sensed the chronivores multiplying, feeding on the temporal distortions and growing stronger. We're running out of time, Gwendolyn warned. Completing a complex sigil, the anchoring points need to be established simultaneously at each major rift. I can't be in multiple places at once, Ben said. Frustration evident despite his enhanced state. Yes, you can. Charmcaster approached, holding out her hand. In her palm rested a small purple crystal. A soul gem. Empty, but capable of holding a fragment of consciousness. With the dragon's power, you could project aspects of yourself to each location. Ben hesitated. That's dark magic, Charmcaster. It was, she agreed. But magic is intent, Ben. I've learned that much in my exile. The same tool that can enslave can also liberate. After a moment's consideration, Ben nodded. Do it. The ritual that followed transcended conventional magic. Charmcaster split the soul gem into 5 fragments, each imbued with a portion of Ben's consciousness merged with the dragon's power. Gwendolyn established the interdimensional coordinates, WH. Julie's symbiotic technology stabilized the energy flow between them. Ben remained at the temple, the primary anchor, while aspects of his consciousness traveled to each major rift across Bellwood. At precisely the right moment, they activated the anchoring spell simultaneously. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The rifts began to close, the dimensional walls reinforcing themselves. The chronivores shrieked as they were pulled back to their native dimension, their temporal feast interrupted. In the temple, Maltruant watched with undisguised fury as his plan collapsed. This changes nothing, Tennyson. The transformation has begun. The eternal dragon will rise, and with it, a new age of cosmic order that even you cannot predict. Ben approached the contained chronocypian, his drive, iconic features reflecting the ancient wisdom now partially integrated with his consciousness. You're right about one thing, Maltruant. Change is coming, but it won't be dictated by your vision. With a gesture, he opened a specialized dimensional portal. Professor Paradox sends his regards. He's prepared a special pocket dimension for you, one where time doesn't pass at all. Before Maltruant could respond, the portal engulfed him, sealing shut with a sound like a clock winding down. The temple grew quiet, the crisis temporarily averted. But all of them knew this was merely the beginning. The Omnitrix will continue to evolve, Gwendolyn said, examining Ben's transformed state with professional curiosity. In my world, it took years for the process to complete. Maltruant accelerated things here, Charmcaster added. The dragon has awakened ahead of schedule. There will be complications. Julie approached Ben, her symbiotic arm having receded somewhat, though the circuit-like patterns remained beneath her skin. Are you still, you? Ben looked down at his scaled hands, feeling the immense power coursing through him, the knowledge of countless realities now accessible to his consciousness. Yet beneath it all, he was still Ben Tennyson, hero, friend, human. I'm still me, he said. Just more than I was before. The Omnitrix symbol pulsed, and his form shifted, the draconic aspects receding until he stood before them in human form once more. But something had changed, a faint iridescence to his skin, eyes that held depths that hadn't been there before. The transformation isn't complete, he explained, sensing their questions. What happened tonight was just the beginning. The eternal dragon is awakening, but slowly now, integrating with my consciousness rather than overwhelming it. What happens next? Julie asked. Ben looked between the three women who had come to his aid tonight. Gwendolyn Horizon, dimensional traveler with nowhere to return to, Charmcaster, seeking redemption after years in exile, and Julie Yamamoto, his former girlfriend now bound to alien technology that responded to the same crisis that affected him. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we're going to find out together. Outside the temple, dawn broke over Bellwood. The dimensional rifts had closed, leaving only faint scars in reality that would heal with time. But the changes set in motion, to Ben, to the Omnitrix, to the very fabric of reality, were just beginning. The countdown to the final evolution had begun. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Fractures Between Worlds. Morning light filtered through the reinforced windows of Plumber headquarters, casting long shadows across the conference room where tension hung thick in the recycled air. Ben sat motionless at the head of the table, eyes closed, concentrating on the internal struggle that had become his constant companion since the events at the Temple of Tempest 3 days ago. The Omnitrix occasionally pulsed with violet light, each flash accompanied by a barely perceptible ripple of scales beneath his skin. Across the table, Magistrate Tennyson, Grandpa Max, studied a holographic display of Bell. Ood with 13 pulsing red markers indicating dimensional weak points. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but the tightness around his eyes spoke volumes. The containment fields are holding for now, Max said, breaking the uneasy silence. But each new rift takes more resources to stabilize. We're running out of specialized equipment. Gwendolyn Horizon paced behind them, her silver streaked auburn hair pulled into a severe bun. Unlike Ben's cousin Gwen, this dimensional variant carried herself with military precision, her movements economical and purposeful. The intricate magical implants visible along her temples glinted in the morning light. Your technology is woefully inadequate, she stated flatly, her accent clipping the words. In my dimension, we'd have established a quantum fold barrier by now. Well, we don't have that luxury, Max replied evenly. What we need is to understand why these rifts are forming in the first place. Ben opened his eyes, now glowing faintly with internal light. They're searching, he said, his voice carrying that subtle harmonic undertone that emerged whenever the dragon entity's consciousness brushed against his own. Searching for what? Max asked. For me, for the dragon. Ben rose, approaching the holographic display. The eternal dragon exists across all dimensions simultaneously. When Maltruant accelerated my transformation, he created echoes, ripples across the multiverse. Like dropping a stone in a pond, Julie offered from her position near the door. The symbiotic technology had spread further across her body. Black circuitry patterns now extending up her neck and across her left cheekbone. The patterns shifted constantly, analyzing and adapting to the information around her. Precisely, Ben nodded. But these ripples aren't dissipating, they're intensifying. Something is amplifying them. The door slid open, and Charmcaster strode in, her silver hair floating unnaturally around her head. Arcane energy crackling between the strands. She'd abandoned her gothic attire for a more practical ensemble of deep purple combat gear, though the mystical runes embroidered along the seams maintained her signature style. Something, or someone, she said, tossing a leather-bound journal onto the conference table. Ancient symbols burned themselves into the cover before fading to reveal angle. Ish text. Interdimensional threat assessment. You've been busy, Max noted, eyeing the sorceress with lingering suspicion. 2 years in the spaces between dimensions gives one a certain perspective. Charmcaster's violet eyes flicked to Ben. The dragon isn't the only cosmic entity stirring. The dimensional barriers were already weakening before Maltruant's interference. He simply exploited an existing vulnerability. Ben felt a strange resonance at her words, the dragon entity within him responding to some truth his human mind couldn't yet grasp. You've encountered something out there. It wasn't a question, but Charmcaster nodded anyway. The chronivores are just foot soldiers. There are greater predators in the void, entities that feed on dimensional energy itself. Her voice dropped. They call themselves the Void Architects. The name sent a chill through the room. Even Gwendolyn, normally stoic, paled visibly. That's impossible, she whispered. The architects were sealed away during the First Reality War, before recorded history, and yet, Charmcaster opened the journal, revealing intricate diagrams of cosmic structures. I found evidence of their influence. N17 different dimensional pockets. Always the same pattern. Reality fractured along precise mathematical lines, the indigenous species manipulated into breaking their own dimensional seals. Julie approached the journal, her technologically enhanced vision scanning the pages rapidly. These calculations, they're similar to what my symbiote detected during the rift formation. Like a signature. Max studied the holographic map with renewed concern. If these void architects are behind the rifts, what's their endgame? Consumption, Ben answered, the dragon's knowledge flowing through him. They feed on collapsing realities. A dying dimension releases enormous energy they've been starving for since their imprisonment. And the dragon? Gwendolyn asked, eyes narrowing. What role does it play in their plans? Ben touched the Omnitrix, which pulsed in response. The dragon is a guardian, a cosmic immune system against precisely this kind of interdimensional infection. That's why the transformation was meant to be gradual, over decades. The human host and dragon consciousness slowly merging, maintaining balance. But Maltruant accelerated the process, Julie concluded. Making you a beacon that the architects can track. A beacon, Charmcaster corrected, or a target. The conference room lights flickered as the Omnitrix surged with energy. Ben gasped, Daub, ling over as violet light crackled across his skin. The others moved to help him, but he raised a hand in warning. Stay back, he managed through gritted teeth. It's happening again. The transfer. Mashin wasn't like his usual alien shifts, it was deeper, molecular, restructuring his very being. Scales rippled beneath his skin, appearing and disappearing as the dragon entity pushed against the boundaries of his humanity. Gwendolyn's hands glowed with arcane energy as she rapidly calculated something in the air. The integration is accelerating. At this rate, the transformation will complete within weeks, not years. Can we slow it down? Max asked, genuine fear in his voice for the first time. We shouldn't, Charmcaster countered. The architects are coming regardless. Ben needs the dragon's power to face them. At what cost? Julie demanded, the technological patterns on her face flaring with her emotion. If he loses himself to the transformation. I won't, Ben interrupted, straightening as the surge subsided. His eyes glowed briefly before returning to normal. But I need to understand what's happening to me. The dragon's knowledge comes in fragments, impressions, not complete information. There is one who might have answers, Gwendolyn said reluctantly. In my dimension, we consulted the Celestial Sapien Observatorium when the transformation began. Celestial Sapiens. Max's eyebrows rose. Even for plumbers, they're nearly mythical. No one knows how to contact them. Ben shared a look with Charmcaster, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Actually, he said, I might know someone who can help with that. The quantum motorcycle hummed beneath Ben as he navigated the winding mountain roads outside Bellwood. Behind him, Julie held tight, her iode-enhanced reflexes adjusting perfectly to each turn. They'd left the others at headquarters, pursuing separate leads, Gwendolyn accessing plumber dimensional records, Charmcaster reinforcing the magical barriers around the rifts, and Max coordinating global response teams as new dimensional weaknesses appeared worldwide. You're sure about this? Julie asked, her voice clear through the helmet's communication system. Professor Paradox isn't exactly the most reliable contact. He shows up when he's needed, Ben replied, guiding the motorcycle around a particularly sharp bend. And right now, we definitely need him. The forest thickened around them as they climbed higher into the mountains. According to Ben's calculations, or rather, the dragon's knowledge filtering through his consciousness, this location marked a natural temporal anomaly, a place where the barriers between moments in time grew naturally thin. They reached a small clearing where a single ancient oak stood, its massive trunk split down the middle as though struck by lightning centuries ago. Ben parked the motorcycle and removed his helmet, his senses immediately detecting the subtle wrongness of the place. Birds that never landed. Insects that moved in perfect geometric patterns, shadows that fell at impossible angles. We're here, he said unnecessarily. Julie dismounted, the symbiotic technology rippling across her skin as it analyzed their surroundings. Time feels different, stretched. A natural chrono fissure, Ben confirmed, approaching the split oak. One of the few places where Paradox can appear without expending much energy. He placed his hand against the gnarled bark, and the Omnitrix responded immediately, pulsing with emerald light that seeped into the wood. The split in the trunk widened slightly, revealing a glimpse of swirling blue energy within. Professor Paradox, Ben called into the void. We need to talk. The air rippled, folded, and unfolded again as a tall, Ian man in antiquated academic attire stepped through what moments before had been solid space. Professor Paradox looked exactly as he always had, ageless, slightly distracted, with the air of someone perpetually amused by a private joke. Young Tennyson, and Ms. Yamamoto as well, how delightful. He checked a pocket watch that didn't seem to have any actual time markings. Right on schedule, of course. Or perhaps early. Time becomes so relative when dealing with cosmic transformations. Ben had long ago learned that Paradox's eccentric demeanor masked a mind that comprehended realities beyond mortal understanding. You know why we're here. The eternal dragon awakens ahead of schedule, dimensional barriers fracture across the multiverse, and the void architects stir in their prison. Paradox snapped his watch closed. A busy week for everyone involved, I'd say. Julie stepped forward, the circuitry patterns on her face glowing softly. You know about the architects. My dear, I was there when they were imprisoned. Though from my perspective that was both several millennia ago and just last Tuesday. Paradox's expression grew momentarily serious. Nasty business. Took the combined efforts of 3 celestial Sapian tribunals and something that wasn't quite a time war to contain them. We need access to the Celestial Sapian Observatorium, Ben said directly. To understand what's happening to me. And how to stop the architects. Paradox raised an eyebrow. The observatorium exists outside conventional dimensions, Benjamin. Even I can only access it under specific cosmic alignments. Which happen to be occurring in 3 days, Ben countered, drawing on the dragon's knowledge. The convergence of rationality and aggression in the forge of creation. Well now, Paradox looked genuinely surprised. The dragon's influence grows stronger indeed if you're aware of such obscure cosmic phenomena. He studied Ben with new interest. The transformation progresses faster than in most timelines. Interesting. Quote, most timelines. Julie asked sharply. You've seen this happen before. The awakening of the eternal dragon is a fixed point across the multiverse, Ms. Yamamoto. The circumstances and timing vary, but the event itself is constant. Paradox began pacing in a perfect circle. In some realities, Benjamin reaches adulthood before the process begins. In others, he's an old man. In a particularly fascinating timeline, the transformation occurred when he was still 10, resulting in a rather precocious cosmic entity with a fondness for smoothies. Ben felt a headache building behind his eyes. Focus, Professor. The observatorium. Yes, yes. Paradox waved dismissively. I can facilitate your access, but there are conditions. The celestial sapiens rate on logic unfathomable to most species. Their consensus requires precise protocols. What kind of protocols? Julie asked. You must approach as supplicants, not equals. Bring offerings of knowledge unknown to them, rare in itself, but possible with your unique perspectives. And, Paradox hesitated, uncharacteristically somber. You must be prepared for the possibility that they will deny your request, or worse. Consider the awakening dragon a threat to cosmic stability. The implications hung heavy in the mountain air. Celestial sapiens possessed the power to rewrite reality itself. If they deemed Ben's transformation dangerous, they might simply erase it, and him, from existence. We'll take that risk, Ben decided after a moment. The architects are the greater threat. Paradox nodded approvingly. Very well. Return here in 3 days, at the exact moment of convergence. Bring the dimensional traveler and the magic user, their perspectives will be valuable. And Benjamin, his voice turned gentle. Continue practicing control. The dragon must be present but restrained for the audience to succeed. With that cryptic advice, Paradox stepped backward, folding once more into the impossible space within the split oak, leaving Ben and Julie alone in the clearing. The ride back to Bellwood was quieter, both lost in their thoughts. As they descended from the mountains, Ben sensed Julie's unspoken concerns through the subtle changes in her posture, the way her hands occasionally tightened around his waist. I'm still me, Jules, he said finally, using the old nickname from their dating days. She rested her helmet against his back briefly. For how long, though? Even Paradox seems uncertain about where this ends. Ben had no answer for that, only the constant crescent of the dragon entity at the edges of his consciousness, ancient and patient, yet growing more insistent by the day. The laboratory beneath Charmcaster's safe house hummed with arcane energy, purple sigils floating in complex three-dimensional arrays that mapped the dimensional fractures across Bellwood. Gwendolyn stood at the center of the magical display, her techno-magical implants interfacing directly with the spell matrix. While Charmcaster meticulously adjusted the mystical formulae. The seventh harmonic is still unstable, Gwendolyn noted, her fingers manipulating an equation hovering before her. The dimensional constant in this reality differs from mine by approximately 0.03%. Negligible in most applications, but critical in cross-dimensional mapping, Charmcaster agreed, making a subtle adjustment that rippled through the entire array. There. The calibration should hold now. The two women had formed an unexpected partnership over the past 3 days, their Ed magical expertise bridging the initial distrust. Though their approaches differed dramatically, Gwendolyn's methodical techno-magic versus Charmcaster's intuitive arcane traditions, they'd found an efficient working rhythm. Your knowledge of runic integration is impressive, Gwendolyn admitted as they fine-tuned the spell matrix. In my dimension, such techniques were lost during the mana purges. Charmcaster allowed herself a small smile. Necessity breeds innovation. When you've spent years trapped between dimensions with nothing but ancient grimoires for company, you develop creative applications. The dimensional map expanded, revealing new details as their combined spell took effect. Red fracture lines spread across the holographic globe like cracks in glass, concentrated prim. Airily around nexus points of magical or technological significance. It's worse than we thought, Gwendolyn said grimly. The pattern isn't random. The fractures are forming a lattice, a dimensional sieve, designed to filter specific energies through our reality. Charmcaster's expression hardened. The architects are using our dimension as a processing point. Processing for what? For them. A new voice joined the conversation as Ben and Julie entered the laboratory. They're preparing to cross over. Ben approached the dimensional map, his eyes shifting briefly to draconic slits as he absorbed the information. The dragon entity within him recognized the pattern instantly, a cosmic trap he'd seen deployed in ancient memories not his own. The architects can't fully manifest in any single dimension, he explained. The dragon's knowledge flowing through him. They exist between realities, feeding on the energy released when dimensions collide. These fractures aren't random Dhamma, GE, they're deliberately placed structural weaknesses. Julie moved to a nearby workstation, her symbiotic technology interfacing with Charmcaster's mystical computers. Data flowed across the screens. As her enhanced systems processed information at superhuman speeds. I'm detecting temporal anomalies at each fracture point, she reported. Similar to what we witnessed with the chronivores, but more controlled, more precise. They're softening the dimensional boundaries, Charmcaster concluded. Preparing for something bigger. Gwendolyn manipulated the map, highlighting a specific pattern of fractures. There's a convergence point. All these dimensional weaknesses align toward a single location. The map zoomed in, revealing a familiar sight. The Temple of Tempest, Ben whispered. Where this all began. Not coincidental, Gwendolyn stated. In my dimension, the temple was built to contain a natural dimensional nexus point, a place where realities naturally intersect. Charmcaster nodded. The same is true here. The temple doesn't just exist in our dimension, it spans multiple realities simultaneously, anchored at different points in each. A perfect invasion point, Julie concluded. Ben felt the dragon stirring within him, responding to the threat with ancient instinct. We need more information before we can act effectively. We've made contact with Professor Paradox. He's going to help us access the Celestial Sapien Observatorium during the convergence in 3 days. Charmcaster's eyes widened. The observatorium. Few mortals have ever returned from such an audience with their sanity intact. We don't have much choice, Ben replied. The architects are planning something significant, and we need to understand exactly what we're facing. In the meantime, Gwendolyn interjected practically. We should establish a permanent monitoring presence at the temple. If it's their convergence point, any major activity will begin there. Ben nodded, feeling a sudden surge of the dragon's power within him. The Omnitrix flared with violet light, and for a moment, scales rippled visibly beneath the skin of his forearms. Charmcaster noticed immediately, moving closer with professional interest. The transformation accelerates. How often does this happen now? More frequently each day, Ben admitted. And the surges are getting stronger. Harder to control. You need magical stabilization, she said decisively. A binding ritual to help regulate the dragon's emergence until you learn to manage the integration yourself. Is that safe? Julie asked, concern evident in her voice. Safer than the alternative, Gwendolyn answered for Charmcaster. In my dimension, Ben underwent similar treatments during his transformation. Without them, the process can become chaotic. Ben remembered the agony of his partial transformation at the temple, the feeling of his very atoms being rewritten. What do you need for this ritual? Charmcaster's eyes gleamed with professional satisfaction. Ingredients I already possess. The ritual itself is complex but not impossible. She glanced at Gwendolyn. With your assistance, we could perform it tonight. I'll help however I can. Gwendolyn agreed. Julie stepped forward, the symbiotic patterns on her skin pulsing with determined energy. Me too. The symbiote can interface with both magical and biology. Cal systems. It might help stabilize the process. Ben looked between the 3 women, each bringing unique expertise to help him face this transformation. Something shifted in his chest. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper. A connection forming that transcended ordinary bonds. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. Night fell over Bellwood, bringing with it a strange atmospheric disturbance that meteorologists struggled to explain. Violet auroras dancing across skies that should have been clear, localized gravitational fluctuations that made objects occasionally float ink. He's above surfaces before settling back down. Citizens accustomed to alien weirdness took it in stride, though few connected these phenomena to the ritual occurring beneath Charmcaster's unassuming townhouse. In the center of the ritual chamber, Ben sat cross-legged within a complex magical circle, shirtless, his skin occasionally rippling with scale patterns as the dragon entity responded to the arcane energies gathering around him. The Omnitrix pulsed steadily, its familiar green light now permanently tinged with violet. Around him, 3 women worked in perfect synchronization, each approaching the ritual from her unique perspective. Charmcaster moved with practiced grace, laying down lines of glowing magical sand and placing enchanted crystals at precise intervals. Her incantations flowed in an ancient language that predated human civilization, each syllable resonating with the fundamental forces of reality. Opposite her, Gwendolyn Horizon wove a complex web of techno-magical filaments, her implants glowing as she calculated and adjusted the spell matrices in real time. Her approach was mathematical, precise, magic reduced to quantifiable energy flows and dimensional constants. Completing the triangle, Julie worked with her symbiotic technology, which had extended into a complex interface system that monitored Ben's biological responses and fed data to both magical practitioners. The black and green circuitry patterns had spread further across her body, creating an elegant asymmetrical design that enhanced her natural beauty while serving its practical function. The containment field is stabilizing, Gwendolyn reported, her fingers dancing through holographic displays only she could see. Dimensional resonance at 87% and rising. The binding sigils are accepting the mana flow, Charmcaster confirmed, her silver hair floating weightlessly as magical energy coursed through her. Primary circuit nearly complete. Julie monitored Ben's vital signs, her expression focused. His cellular structure is fluctuating between human and draconic patterns at an accelerating rate. We need to establish the rhythm lock soon or the transformation could cascade. Ben remained outwardly calm despite the battle raging within him. The dragon entity pushed against the boundaries of his consciousness with increasing urgency, sensing the magical energies gathering around them. It wasn't hostile, merely ancient and powerful, operating on instincts that transcended human understanding. We are meant to be one, its thoughts resonated within him. Why do you resist? Too fast, Ben communicated back. Need time to adapt, to understand. The entity's response came as impressions rather than words, memories of countless transformations across multiple dimensions. Hosts who had successfully integrated with the dragon's consciousness while maintaining their original identities. But also failures, beings consumed by power they couldn't comprehend, dimensions fractured by uncontrolled cosmic energy. The message was clear. Balance was essential. He's communicating with it, Julie reported, the symbiote detecting subtle changes in Ben's neural patterns. Heart rate stabilizing. Charmcaster nodded approvingly. Good. The ritual works best when host and entity establish harmony. She completed a complex sigil sequence, which ignited with brilliant purple flames that gave off no heat. Final binding sequence initiated. The three women began chanting in unison, Charmcaster in the ancient language of legerdemain, Gwendolyn in precise mathematical formulae, and Julie in a strange hybrid language the symbiote had developed to bridge the gap between magic and technology. Despite their different approaches, the three voices harmonized perfectly, creating a resonant frequency that enveloped Ben in concentric rings of multicolored light. Within his mind, Ben visualized the dragon entity, vast beyond comprehension, a being of cosmic energy and purpose that existed simultaneously across countless dimensions. He reached out to it not in fear or dominance, but in partnership. Show me how to balance, he offered. I'll provide the humanity you need to interact with this dimension. You provide the power we need to face the architects. The dragon's consciousness considered this proposal, ancient and patient yet aware of the urgent threat. It responded by revealing more of itself. Its purpose as a guardian against interdimensional threats, its need for a mortal anchor to focus its vast awareness, its experiences with previous hosts across the multiverse. The knowledge flooded through Ben in a torrent that would have overwhelmed him without the ritual's protective framework. He absorbed what he could, guided by the dragon's patient presence, while the excess energy was channeled through the magical circle into stabilizing patterns. Outside his meditative state, the ritual reached its climax. The concentric rings of light contracted, with Ben's body in waves of luminescent energy. The Omnitrix absorbed and redistributed the power, its programming adapting to the cosmic energies flowing through its wearer. A final surge of power illuminated the chamber with blinding intensity. When the light faded, Ben remained in the center of the circle, outwardly unchanged except for a faint iridescent quality to his skin and eyes. He now held depths beyond human experience. Did it work? Julie asked, the symbiotic patterns on her skin gradually receding as the immediate need passed. Ben opened his eyes, which briefly flashed with inner light before settling to their normal green, now flecked with gold. Yes, he said, his voice carrying just a hint of the harmonic resonance that characterized his transformed state. We've reached an understanding. He stood, moving with a fluid grace that seemed both entirely human and subtly not. The scales no longer rippled beneath his skin, though a faint pattern remained visible. In certain lights, an elegant compromise between forms. The transformation hasn't stopped, Charmcaster clarified, examining him with professional scrutiny. But it's now proceeding along controlled parameters. The integration will continue, but gradually, allowing both consciousnesses to adapt. How do you feel? Gwendolyn asked clinically, her implants scanning him for residual dimensional energy. Ben considered the question, taking inventory of his altered state. More connected to everything, he gestured, and small motes of green-gold light appeared around his fingers, dancing like fireflies before dissipating. The dragon's power is accessible without full transformation, but controlled. And the entity itself, Charmcaster pressed, its consciousness, present but not overwhelming. Like, Ben searched for an analogy. Like having another perspective available when I need it. A partnership. Julie approached him, the symbiotic technology scanning him independently. Your cellular structure has stabilized in a hybrid state. Not fully human anymore, but not fully transformed either. Ben met her gaze, seeing the unasked question in her eyes. I'm still me, Jules. Just with some expansions. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Julie had been his first love years ago, before the demands of their separate paths had pulled them apart. Now circumstance had brought them together again, both changed in profound ways. The moment was interrupted by a sudden alarm from Gwendolyn's techno-magical sensors. Dimensional breach in progress, she announced. Summoning a holographic display. Multiple locations simultaneously. The display showed fracture points across Bellwood pulsing with crimson energy. Unlike the previous rifts, these appeared controlled. Precise. Opening just enough to allow something through. The architects are making their move, Charmcaster said grimly, already gathering her magical equipment. Earlier than we anticipated, Ben felt the dragon's consciousness surge forward with ancient recognition. Not the architects themselves, he corrected. They're heralds. Heralds? Julie asked. Scouts. Advance forces. Ben moved to the center of the room, the Omnitrix glowing with newfound intensity. They're testing our defenses, measuring our response capabilities. Then let's give them something to measure. Gwendolyn said with grim determination, her hands already glowing with techno-magical energy. Ben nodded, reaching for the Omnitrix. But instead of selecting an alien form, he simply placed his hand over the device, establishing a connection to the dragon entity within. The transformation that followed wasn't the painful, chaotic process of before, but a smooth, controlled evolution. Scales of midnight blue rippled across his skin, forming an elegant armor that accentuated rather than replaced his human physique. Draconic wings unfurled from his back, smaller than in his previous transformation but perfectly formed for flight. His face remained recognizably human, though his eyes now glowed with inner light and small horns curved elegantly above his temples. Let's go, he said, his harmonically resonant voice filled with quiet authority. Julie, coordinate with Plumber forces from headquarters. Charmcaster, Gwendolyn, with me. The three nodded, recognizing the Nadu. Raw leadership emerging from Ben's balanced merger with the dragon entity. As they prepared to face this new threat, something shifted in the dynamic between them, respect deepening into something more complex. Bonds forming that transcended ordinary relationships. The dragon sensed these connections forming and approved. In the battles to come, such bonds would prove essential not just to their success, but to Ben's humanity. The industrial district at Bellwood's Edge had been abandoned since the Incarsine invasion years earlier, its factories and warehouses standing as hollow monuments to economic disruption. Tonight, however, the district teemed with unearthly activity as dimensional rifts opened throughout the area, each disgorging strange entities unlike anything Earth had faced before. From the air, Ben surveyed the situation with enhanced senses that perceived beyond ordinary vision. The heralds appeared as humanoid figures composed of crystalline structures that constantly shifted and reformed. Their bodies refracting light in impossible ways. They moved with mechanical precision, systematically establishing positions around what Ben recognized as ley line intersectee. ONs, natural channels of dimensional energy. They're creating a network, he reported to Charmcaster, who flew beside him on a platform of magical energy. preparing the ground for something larger. I count 17 distinct entities. Gwendolyn added from her position on a parallel platform, her techno-magical implants scanning and analyzing. Each operating at a different harmonic frequency. They're attenuating to our dimensional constants, Charmcaster realized. Adapting their energy signatures to establish permanent bridgeheads. Below them, the crystalline entities began a synchronized movement, extending limbs that morphed into sophisticated technological apparatuses. Where these touched the ground, reality itself seemed to thin, the dimensional barriers weakening visibly. We need to disrupt their pattern. Ben decided. Gwendolyn, can you establish a counter-harmonic field? Theoretically, yes, she replied, already calculating. But I'd need to interface directly with this reality's ley line network. The dimensional constants are still slightly off from my native calibration. Charmcaster nodded in understanding. I can anchor you to our dimensional frequency. It's a simple enough adaptation. The two women synchronized their magical approaches with impressive efficiency, Gwendolyn's techno-magical precision complementing Charmcaster's intuitive grasp of this dimension's mystical currents. Within moments, they'd established a counter-resonance field that began to interfere with the Herald's activities. The crystalline entities reacted immediately, air forms shifting toward more combat-oriented configurations. Faceted limbs elongated into blade-like appendages that gleamed with interdimensional energy. They've noticed us, Ben observed unnecessarily. Time to introduce ourselves properly. He dove toward the nearest cluster of heralds, the dragon's power flowing through him in controlled waves. Unlike his previous battles, where raw stray, NGTH or alien abilities determined his approach, Ben now fought with cosmic precision. Each movement channeled dimensional energy with calculated effect, disrupting the heralds' crystalline structures at their fundamental frequency. The first herald to face him shattered into iridescent fragments that dissolved into nothingness before reaching the ground. The second and third adapted quickly, the IR crystalline structures shifting to compensate for his attacks. Ben adjusted just as rapidly, the dragon's ancient knowledge guiding him to exploit weaknesses in their dimensional anchoring. Above the battlefield, Charmcaster and Gwendolyn worked in tandem, combining different magical traditions to devastating effect. Charmcaster's raw magical power, refined through years of intensive study, provided the force behind their attacks. While Gwendolyn's techno-magical precision guided that power with mathematical accuracy. Their adaptation rate is increasing, Gwendolyn called out, her implants processing data in real time. They're learning from each defeat. Then we change the rules, Charmcaster replied, drawing complex sigils in the air that glowed with vibrant purple energy. Chronos and Versus. The spell took effect immediately, creating a localized temporal distortion that caused several heralds to experience time in reverse, unmaking their own adaptations. Ben seized the opportunity, channeling the dragon's energy through the Omnitrix in a concentrated burst that disrupted the dimensional frequency of the affected heralds, causing them to destabilize and dissolve. But for each herald they defeated, the remaining entities grew more resilient, more coordinated. Their crystalline forms began resonating in complex harmonies, strengthening the dimensional weaknesses they'd established. They're not just scouts, Ben realized, the dragon's knowledge providing sudden insight. They're preparing for immediate colonization. The architects aren't waiting for the convergence, they're making their move now. As if confirming his assessment, the largest rift at the center of the industrial district began to widen, its edges crystallizing into an ornate archway that pulsed with eldritch energy. Beyond the portal, a vast shadowy presence began to take form, not fully materialized, but extending tendrils of influence into their reality. An architect, Gwendolyn whispered, genuine fear in her voice for the first time. It's too soon, we're not prepared for this level of manifestation. Ben felt the dragon entity surge within him, responding to the ancient enemy with primal recognition. For a moment, their merged consciousness glimpsed the true nature of the being emerging through the portal. A cosmic entity of immense age and power, one that had witnessed the birth and death of countless realities. Balthazar the Void Weaver, the dragon's knowledge named it. Architect of 1,000 fallen dimensions. Acting on instinct and ancient memory, Ben flew directly toward the widening portal. Ignoring Charmcaster's shout of warning, the Omnitrix blazed with emerald and violet light as he channeled more of the dragon's power than he'd dared to access before. By the authority of the Cosmic Guardians, he proclaimed, his voice resonating with dimensional force. "I deny you entry to this reality, Balthazar." The naming had power. The shadowy entity recoiled as if struck, its formless mass convulsing within the interdimensional space. The tendrils it had extended toward Earth's dimension began to retract. Ben pressed his advantage, drawing on the Drago N's knowledge to weave a complex pattern of dimensional energy, a sealing matrix that would reinforce the natural barriers the architects had weakened. But Balthazar was no minor entity to be banished so easily. The architect rallied, sending a wave of anti-dimensional force through the portal that struck Ben with devastating impact. Pain unlike anything he'd experienced before coursed through his body as his very atoms threatened to unravel under the assault. "Ben." Charmcaster's voice cut through his agony, her magic enveloping him in a protective cocoon. Beside her, Gwendolyn added her own techno-magical shields, the two women combining their powers to stabilize his fluctuating form. Protected by their combined efforts, Ben regrouped, assessing the situation with both human tactical thinking and the dragon's cosmic awareness. Direct confrontation would fail. The architect was too powerful, too established in its approach. They needed to change the paradigm. "The portal," he gasped, still recovering from the attack. "It's stabilized by the Herald's harmonic network. If we disrupt enough nodes simultaneously, we can collapse the entry point," Gwendolyn finished, already calculating. "But we'd need to strike at least 12 nodes within a 3-second window." "Impossible with just the three of us," Charmcaster stated flatly. Ben's communicator crackled to life. "Not impossible with proper backup," came Julie's voice, followed by the sound of advanced weaponry powering up. From the perimeter of the industrial district, a squadron of plumber agents appeared, led by Julie herself. The symbiotic technology had formed an elegant battle suit around her body, black and green circuitry patterns forming functional armor that enhanced her natural agility. Behind her, lumber teams moved into position with specialized equipment clearly designed for this specific threat. Dimensional destabilizers, courtesy of Galvan technology and some creative adaptation by yours truly, Julie explained. The symbiote allowing her to communicate directly through Ben's Omnitrix. "On your mark, we can target all 17 nodes simultaneously." Ben felt a surge of admiration for her efficiency and foresight. While they'd been engaging the immediate threat, Julie had been coordinating the larger response, analyzing the situation from headquarters and developing an effective countermeasure. "Perfect timing," he acknowledged, quickly synchronizing their attack plan through the tactical network. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, execute." The coordinated strike was flawlessly precise. 17 beams of specialized energy struck the Heralds, positioned simultaneously, disrupting the harmonic network they'd established. The crystalline entities shuddered, their forms destabilizing as their connection to their home dimension wavered. Ben seized the moment, channeling the dragon's power through the Omnitrix in a concentrated burst directed at the central portal. The dimensional gateway shuddered, its edges beginning to collapse inward. Balthazar's presence roared in silent fury, lashing out with desperate tendrils of void energy that sought purchase in Earth's dimension. One such tendril struck a nearby warehouse, instantly transforming the structure into an impossible geometric configuration that hurt the human eye to observe. "The portal's collapsing too slowly," Gwendolyn warned, her implants calculating the dissolution rate. "The architect still has time to establish a foothold. Then we accelerate the process," Charmcaster decided, her expression turning grim. She pulled a small crystal from a pouch at her belt, a soul gem similar to those she'd once used for darker purposes. "This contains pure dimensional energy I harvested during my exile. Properly applied, it should catalyze the portal's collapse." Before anyone could object, she hurled the crystal directly into the portal's heart, simultaneously casting a complex spell that caused the gem to detonate with spectacular force. The dimensional gateway imploded, drawing Balthazar's partially manifested presence back into the void between realities. The backlash of energy knocked everyone off their feet. When the dust settled, the industrial district was silent once more. The heralds vanished along with their master. Ben picked himself up, his draconic form reverting to its more an aligned state as the immediate danger passed. He surveyed the aftermath. Reality slowly restabilizing, though the warehouse Balthazar had touched remained a twisted monument to interdimensional interference. "That was too close," he said as the others gathered around him. They're testing our defenses, but that was no mere test. Balthazar intended to establish a permanent presence here. And it nearly succeeded, Gwendolyn added soberly, if we hadn't been prepared. But we were, Julie pointed out, the symbiotic battle suit reconfiguring into its more streamlined form. Because we worked together. Charmcaster brushed dust from her clothing, affecting nonchalance though her magical senses remained on high alert. A temporary victory at best. The architects now have a direct measure of our capabilities. And they'll adapt their next approach accordingly. Ben nodded, feeling the dragon's consciousness analyzing the encounter, storing information for future confrontations. All the more reason to proceed with our plan. The Celestial Sapien Observatorium may be our only source of information sufficient to counter their next move. As plumber teams secured the area, establishing monitoring equipment to detect any further dimensional disturbances, the four gathered in a tight circle, a tacit acknowledgement of the bonds forming between them. Despite their disparate backgrounds and abilities, they had functioned as a seamless unit tonight, protecting not just Bellwood but potentially Earth's entire dimension from cosmic threat. 3 days until the convergence, Ben reminded them. We need to be ready. Morning found them gathered in the kitchen of Charmcaster's townhouse, the domestic setting incongruous with the cosmic scale of their recent battle. Gwendolyn sat at the table reviewing dimensional scans on a holographic display, while Charmcaster prepared an arcane brew that smelled surprisingly like coffee despite the faint purple glow it emitted. Julie leaned against the counter. The symbiotic patterns on her skin minimal in this relaxed setting, though still present along her left arm and shoulder. Ben entered from the balcony where he'd been meditating. His human appearance fully restored though his movements retained that subtle grace that betrayed his altered nature. The night's battle had accelerated his integration with the dragon entity, leading to a deeper understanding of the cosmic consciousness now sharing his mind. The dimensional barriers have stabilized, he announced, accepting a mug of the glowing brew from Charmcaster. For now, at least. Plumber teams report no further activity at any of the monitoring stations, Julie confirmed, checking data on a tablet. Whatever the architects were planning, they've gone back to the drawing board. Don't mistake tactical retreat for defeat, Gwendolyn cautioned, her military background evident in her assessment. In my dimension, the architects employed similar strategies. Probing attacks followed by periods of apparent inactivity while they analyzed and adapted. Charmcaster nodded agreement. Interdimensional entities operate on different temporal scales. What seems like withdrawal to us might simply be a pause to them, a moment's consideration before their next approach. Ben sipped the luminous coffee, finding its taste both familiar and exotic, like the finds. Tea earth coffee infused with something indefinably other. The dragon's memories confirm that pattern. The architects are patient predators. They've waited eons for this opportunity. Which gives us precious little time to prepare, Gwendolyn said, closing her holographic display. The convergence is in 2 days, and we still need suitable offerings for the Celestial Sapiens. I've been considering that, Julie said, the symbiote rippling briefly across her skin as it accessed stored information. The symbiote contains comprehensive data on galvanic mechamorph evolution, specifically, their dimensional resonance capacities. It's possible the Celestial Sapiens would find this information valuable, particularly as it relates to artificial species development. Charmcaster raised an eyebrow, impressed. Creative thinking. Celestial Sapiens generally disregard technological species as ephemeral curiosities, but mechamorphs exist in an interesting gray area between technology and life. I can offer dimensional constants from my reality, Gwendolyn added. Particularly the mathematical proofs developed during our resonance wars that demonstrate the interconnectivity of parallel timelines. And I have knowledge gathered during my exile, Charmcaster said, including several dimensional pockets the Celestial Sapiens may not have catalogued, places too small or unstable for their notice, but potentially valuable for their cosmic records. Ben listened to their proposals, the dragon entity within him evaluating each with ancient wisdom. These women had come together under extraordinary circumstances, each bringing unique perspectives and abilities that complemented one another. What had begun as an alliance of necessity was evolving into something deeper, a team bound by shared purpose and growing mutual respect. And perhaps something more. He'd noticed the subtle shifts in their interactions, the way Charmcaster's customary sarcasm softened when addressing Julie's technical questions. How Gwendolyn's military formality relaxed in moments of shared magical discovery, the professional admiration between Julie and Gwendolyn evolving into genuine friendship. And running beneath it all, the complex emotions each woman was developing toward him, emotions he found himself reciprocating in ways that would have confused his younger self. The dragon entity observed these developing bonds with approval. Throughout its ancient existence, it had known many hosts across countless dimensions, and those who maintained strong emotional connections invariably achieved the most balanced integration. Ben. Julie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. You've been quiet. What will you offer the Celestial Sapiens? He considered the question carefully. The dragon's memories include encounters with the architects from the First Reality War, tactical information the Celestial Sapiens might find valuable. But more importantly, he touched the Omnitrix, which pulsed in response. I'll offer them the opportunity to examine this unique integration between human, dragon, and Omnitrix. It's unprecedented in the multiverse, according to both Azimuth's records and the dragon's knowledge. A risky offer, Gwendolyn observed. You'd be presenting yourself as both supplicant and subject of study. The risk is necessary, Ben replied. We need their knowledge, and they value novelty above almost all else. This transformation represents something truly new in a cosmos they've observed for eternity. The conversation was interrupted by a familiar temporal distortion as Professor Esser Paradox appeared in the center of the kitchen, helping himself to a mug of Charmcaster's glowing coffee with the casual air of someone making a routine social call. Excellent brew, he complimented, ignoring their startled expressions. Much better than the standard temporally fixed variety. Professor, Ben acknowledged, unsurprised by the time traveler's unexpected appearance. Something's changed. Indeed it has. Paradox set down his mug, his normally affable expression turning serious. The convergence has accelerated. The alignment of rationality and aggression in the Forge of Creation will now occur tomorrow. Not 3 days hence. That's impossible, Gwendolyn objected. Celestial alignments don't simply change their schedule. They do when higher dimensional entities manipulate the cosmic constants. Paradox corrected. The architects are more resourceful than anticipated. They're attempting to deny you access to the observatorium by shifting the temporal alignment. Can they do that? Julie asked, alarmed. They shouldn't be able to, Charmcaster said, her expression grave. Manipulating cosmic constants requires power on par with Celestial Sapiens themselves. Or the combined effort of several architects working in concert, Ben added, the dragon's knowledge providing insight. They fear what we might learn from the observatorium. Which confirms we're on the right track. Gwendolyn concluded. Paradox nodded approvingly. Precisely. Your preparations must accelerate accordingly. The window for access will be briefer than originally calculated. Approximately 73 minutes rather than the standard day-long opportunity. We'll be ready, Ben assured him, feeling the dragon's determination reinforcing his own. I have no doubt. Paradox finished his coffee and set the mug down with a satisfied sigh. One other matter requires attention before I depart. The Temple of Tempest must be secured before your journey to the observatorium. The architect's failed attempt to establish a bridgehead has made them desperate, and the temple remains their most viable entry point to this dimension. We've established monitoring systems around the temple, Julie said. Any dimensional activity will trigger immediate alerts. Passive observation won't be sufficient, Paradox warned. The temple requires active guardianship, preferably by someone with both magical aptitude and dimensional awareness. All eyes turned to Charmcaster, who raised an eyebrow. I suppose that would be me, then. Your expertise with interdimensional barriers makes you the logical choice. Gwendolyn acknowledged. But alone. She won't be alone, came a new voice from the doorway. They turned to find Max Tennyson standing there, accompanied by A.F. A familiar figure in black and green, Kevin Levin, his arms crossed and expression guarded as he surveyed the gathering. Kevin, Ben greeted his old friend, noting the wariness in his eyes. When did you get back from the Andromeda mission? This morning, Kevin replied, his gaze taking in Ben's subtly altered appearance. Grandpa Max filled me in on the basics. Cosmic dragon transformation, dimensional invasions, apocalypse-level threat. He shrugged with deliberate casualness. Tuesday in Bellwood, basically. Despite his flippant tone, Ben sensed his friend's concern and underlying tension. He and Kevin had weathered countless crises together, but this situation was different. Ben himself was different, changed in ways that transcended ordinary alien transformation. Kevin has unique experience with energy absorption and interdimensional phenomena, Max explained. He'll assist Charmcaster in securing the temple while the rest of you proceed to the observatorium. Charmcaster studied Kevin with professional assessment. Your Osmosian abilities could indeed complement my magical approaches. Assuming you can follow basic instructions without breaking anything valuable. Kevin's lips twitched in a reluctant half-smile. I've gotten slightly better at the not breaking things part. No promises though. The tension in the room eased slightly, though Ben noticed Kevin still watching him with subtle caution, the instinctive wariness of a predator recognizing the emergence of something potentially higher on the food chain. The dragon entity within him acknowledged this reaction without judgment. Trust would need to be rebuilt in the face of such fundamental change. Then our course is set, Ben said, bringing focus back to their immediate challenges. We leave for the convergence point tomorrow. Until then, we prepare our offerings and continue monitoring for architect activity. As the others dispersed to their respective tasks, Julie lingered, waiting until they were alone before speaking. He's afraid of you, she said quietly. Kevin, I could see it in his body language. Ben nodded, unsurprised by her perception. He has good reason to be cautious. He's encountered cosmic entities before, rarely with positive outcomes. Is he right to be afraid? She asked, the question direct but her tone gentle. Ben considered this, feeling the dragon's consciousness stir within him. Not of me, he said finally, but of what's happening. Yes. This transformation changes everything, Julie. Not just for me, but potentially for the entire cosmos. That's what scares me too, she admitted. The symbiotic patterns on her skin pulsing with her emotion. Not you becoming something more, but, what if there's less of Ben Tennyson afterward? The person I've known since we were teenagers. The question touched something fundamental, a fear Ben himself grappled with during quiet moments of reflection. He stepped closer, taking her hand. The symbiote rippled at his touch, recognizing and responding to the hybrid energy that now flowed through him. I'm still me, he promised. Different, yes, evolving, certainly, but still Ben Tennyson. The dragon Dosen. She want to replace me, it needs what makes me human. My perspective, my connections, he hesitated, then continued more softly, my capacity to care. To love. The word hung between them, loaded with history and new possibility. Julie's eyes searched his, finding familiar green depths now illuminated with something ancient and new. Good, she said finally, squeezing his hand. Because we're going to need Ben Tennyson for what's coming. The hero who always finds another way, who never gives up, who sees the best in everyone, even his enemies. A smile touched her lips. The guy who somehow balances saving the universe with remembering to call his grandpa on Sundays. Ben laughed, the sound entirely human despite the cosmic entity sharing his consciousness. In that moment, Julie's sense anchored him to his humanity more effectively than any magical ritual could have done. Tomorrow they would face the celestial sapiens, seeking knowledge to combat an interdimensional threat anything they'd previously encountered. The path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with cosmic dangers and personal transformations. But for now, in this quiet moment of connection, Ben Tennyson remained himself, hero, friend. And perhaps something more to the remarkable women who had joined his strangest journey yet. The dragon observed, approved, and settled into patient anticipation of what was to come. Chapter 2 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.